Do the Giants have one of the worst cores in all of baseball? Locked On Giants explores it next.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on this show we provide daily episodes, Monday through Friday, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, and I'm a lifelong fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts. Today's episode is brought to you by Vroom. With Vroom, you can buy a car entirely online and have it delivered straight to you, so you never have to go to a dealership again. So next time you need to buy a car, just grab your phone, go to vroom.com, and check out thousands of great cars. And coming up on today's show, we are going to get into this Kiley McDaniel piece on ESPN talking about cores in all of baseball. And I just thought it was a really interesting idea. And I also respect Kiley McDaniel. I respect his work and I trust his kind of evaluations. He's worked for 4 different teams. He was a prospect analyst at Fangraphs and now writing for ESPN, I think, as their lead kind of prospect guy. But this article, he's talking about players who are under team control through at least 2024. So, I mean, actually, is it 20? Yeah, I think it's 2024. So that's only 2 additional seasons. But that counting prospects, right? So guys who could come up and be part of a future core. And then he kind of ranks them into 3 different tiers. Elite, which is like he said 5+ wins above replacement type players. These are your stars. Above average, which is your like 3 to 5 WAR players. And then solid, which is your kind of the best role players, 2 to 3 wins above replacement. Now, wins above replacement, we only use that number because it's just like the best attempt at having one number that quantifies the value of a player. Now, you might say, oh, you can't do that, but the main reason I use it combines what you do offensively, combines what you do defensively, what position you play, and base running value. And it just puts it into one number, and it's how many wins above a replacement level player. Then it's an estimate. These numbers should never be taken like down to the fine decimal points. But, you know, Carlos Rodon has led the Giants in WAR. Okay, anyway, I'm getting off topic. But the big headline here is that the Giants rank 28th, and that I think it's spot on. And actually, there are the 2 teams below the Giants have a case, in my opinion, to be actually ahead of the Giants. So this is a big turn of events from last year when the Giants, a lot was maybe pushed under the rug in terms of concerns about the future when they were on their way to such a great season and when they had such a great season. But what stands out about 2021 is that they did have Brandon Crawford, Buster Posey, and Brandon Belt combined producing about 15 Fangraphs wins above replacement. And this year they don't have a single player with more than 2, more than even 1.9. They don't have a single player with 2+ at this point. And last year they had a trio combined for 15. So think about that. And that's a big difference. So the blurb about the Giants being ranked 28th by Kiley McDaniel says, quote, "This one was shocking. The Giants were the darlings of the industry last year with a Midas touch on free agent pitchers, a standout coaching staff, and a how did this happen level surprise record with underlying performances to match. It now looks like that was more than a bit lucky, with the team currently performing at the level everyone thought they would last year. Webb is a legit scouting and development success story, and I'd bet at least Marco Luciano or Kyle Harrison will be another, but the Giants will need to spend in free agency to bolster this core, and I bet they will." End quote. So just to put the players into the categories that McDaniel puts them in, elite, none. And again, these are guys locked up through at least 2024. And so I think if you had Rodon on a longer term deal, he might go into that elite category. He's currently at about 5 wins above replacement, and the season's not over. So he'll get to, I don't know, closer to 6 by the time the season is over, most likely. And then above average, I mean, Webb kind of teeters, I think, on could be put into that elite category, but I think it's fair to have him in the above average category. And this doesn't mean like just a smidge above average. It means like solidly above average. He said players in this tier are like perennial all-star candidates, but the elite guys are like the stars of the game. You know, Aaron Judge, and we'll talk about Judge a little bit later. But in the solid category, I did think there were some interesting names mixed into the solid category in Alex Cobb, Marco Luciano, Kyle Harrison, Joey Bart, Austin Slater, Mike Yastrzemski, Thairo Estrada, Camilo Doval, Luis Matos, Patrick Bailey, and Anthony DeSclafani. So interesting, we get Cobb and DeSclafani, no Wood. But I agree, Cobb has been quite solid. Might even put him in the above average category if he didn't have all that bad luck kind of early on. He's just, the underlying numbers are so good. But regardless, even with this collection of players and having quite a few in the solid category, it still ranks 28th. And importantly, I'm not sure I mentioned this, but McDaniel kind of consulted with executives around the game prior to like releasing the list. And so it's not just what one person thinks about the Giants, it's kind of how the industry views the Giants core right now. So we've basically said as much, and we've said they have like one really good future piece in Logan Webb right now. And there's some intriguing guys with Cobb and with Bart and with Estrada and Doval. And we talked the other day about how the Giants could sign a couple of outfielders and then have maybe one platoon spot and use it for Yastrzemski and Slater. And so it's interesting here that those two are selected as the two in that kind of platoon outfield situation. Notice no Lamont Wade Jr., notice no Jock Peterson, although he's not locked up for beyond this season. But still, I just agree 100% that the Giants will need to spend in free agency to bolster this core, and I bet they will. That's like my famous last words. I'm saying that all the time, that I think they'll finally do it, but at this point, I'm not sure they have much of a choice, and this list completely does a very good job of making that point. So in just a minute, we're going to address how can the Giants fix this situation, who is out there in free agency that could legitimately change the ranking here, because this is an important ranking. You can't be good if you just don't have a good core. So all of that in just a second. But first, are you one of those people who thinks it's okay to drive stoned? What's the worst that can happen? You end up driving below the speed limit? It's no big deal, right? Wrong. The truth is your reaction times slow way down when you're high. You not only put yourself in danger, but everyone around you. Talk about a buzzkill. Stop kidding yourself. It's not okay to drive high. If you've been using marijuana in any form, don't get behind the wheel. If you feel different, you drive different. Drive high, get a DUI. Okay, as promised, the Giants and their core, and it stinks. Which, I mean, come on, it's kind of predictable, right? Because I know some people were really blowing this horn in the offseason. Before you get too full of yourself about, oh, I said they were going to have problems this year, let's be honest with yourself. What did you think they were going to be like in 2021? Did you say 107 wins were coming? Because my hot take, Locked On wanted us to have a hot take coming into the season, and mine was that they would be 86 and 76. That was some kind of hot take, and they won like 21 more games than that. Unbelievable. Than my hot take. And so it's hard to predict baseball. That is kind of the big message here, is that you may have thought they would be bad in 2021 and they were good. You may have thought they'd be good in 2022 and they've been bad, and vice versa. Like, it's just hard to predict this crazy game. I would like the Giants to just have a smack you in the face, obviously good roster, like the Dodgers. There's no question about the Dodgers coming into the year. They don't have to break out the pixie dust and magic in order to overperform the projections and have a good season. They're just like, oh, projected at 98 wins. And then, oh, we're going to overperform that and win 113, which they very well may do this season. They already have 90 wins prior to September. So regardless, that's where the Giants need to be eventually, is just a actually good team and not some team that needs pixie dust. But as I said, they got star level performance from Crawford, Posey, and Belt last year. And in hindsight, and a lot of people did say this coming into the season, I gave them a C- offseason grade because I thought they didn't do enough on the position player side. But it was foolish to expect, because you need star level production from some guys. And who was it going to be? Who did they think it was going to be this season? I think they thought that Crawford is like probably exhibit A most important. He put up the most of anybody, finished 4th in MVP voting in the National League last year. Like, that's no small accomplishment. He had a 138 weighted runs created plus, was good defensively, 6.3 Fangraphs wins above replacement. That's in the elite category in terms of he's not signed through 2024, which is probably a good thing considering how this year has gone. But Posey obviously left, and then Belt has had his injury issues. So who did they think was going to be carrying the load here and being that star talent? Regardless, Webb is very good, so they've got some of it in the rotation. Rodon is very good. So to me, it could begin, in terms of how do you fix this moving forward, it could begin with simply extending Carlos Rodon. Now, I'm not sure he wants to be here. This has kind of been a bummer of a season, and if I were him, I'd probably want to see what else is out there, because this is his one experience of playing for the Giants, and hasn't been pretty, hasn't been fun. Like, there's other intriguing options out there if you're Rodon and you're the best. Jacob deGrom is going to be a free agent, so I hesitate to say he's the best starter available, but he'll probably get the most guaranteed money, or at least he'll be up there near deGrom. deGrom will get a shorter term deal because he's older and much more of an injury history in the recent past. But anyway, Rodon can get $100+ million. It's a similar situation to Gausman. But if you re-sign Rodon for Dan Szymborski over at Zips projections featured on Fangraphs, said that the projection system suggested 4 years, $119 million for Rodon. And that's a little pricey on a per year basis, but I like the fact that it's 4 years, and the Giants, they're not very good with him. And so I really feel like they kind of need to, whether it's Rodon or like deGrom, they need to bring back an upper tier pitcher. So anyway, I think that it could start with signing Rodon to a longer term deal. But will he want to come back, and will they even make him an offer like they didn't make Kevin Gausman? I don't know. But I personally think they probably should, even though these deals are fraught with risk. If you really feel like he's going to break down over the next 4 years, don't do it. But you got to replace him some other way. So to me, the most obvious guy, and it's probably the most obvious to you, I think they need to sign Aaron Judge. I think you must sign Aaron Judge. Okay, maybe must is a strong word, but he is someone who would immediately go into the elite category. And look, you're not building your roster to be better on Kiley McDaniel's list, right? You're trying to win games. But my goodness, Aaron Judge would help you win some games. The one issue is that he's going to be 31 in any year one of a deal. He'll turn 31 like just before the season or just after the season starts next year. So if you sign him to a 7-year deal, that means in year 7, he'll be 37 before the season starts. And so I have concerns about that. And I think everybody should if you're being realistic. Like a lot of these guys, Albert Pujols, like when he was a free agent, he was around that age, 31, when he started year 1 of that deal in Anaheim. I actually don't have it pulled up, but off of memory, I believe he was like early 30s in the beginning of that deal. And it was just a disaster the whole time. And there are numerous examples of this. And Pujols, first ballot Hall of Famer, might get to 700 home runs this year, like reaching a total of 700 for his career. This year he's at like 690 something. So all-time legend, but after age 30 just wasn't nearly the same guy. And so I do worry about that with an Aaron Judge, simply because of the age, and also, though, his size. I just am not sure how a guy that big is going to age. However, it is just too intriguing for me to pass up. I think they should at least be heavily in the mix, and not just in the mix, but like be at the finish line. And the thing is, I think that they could have a shot at Aaron Judge because he grew up a Giants fan. I've seen interviews with him when he's got like a Buster Posey jersey hanging behind him. This guy likes the Giants. And so he's a face of a franchise, he's a face of the sport type of player. There's some risk, but I think they're at the point where they need to take some risks. And they don't have like any long-term commitments burdening them. And so you can almost afford to make a mistake. Like if Judge turns out to be a mistake, but you don't make that type of deal with anybody else, you get your one 31-year-old big contract, and then you kind of don't do that again and there's sometimes the rare case where guys reach free agency and they're younger, 26 or whatever. You could go after those guys, but maybe don't do that again with Judge, and then it could go south and you still are not crippled financially, or it doesn't just ruin your roster, which is kind of the situation they got themselves into when Bobby Evans was fired. They had all these commitments to guys who were not performing up to the level at which they were being paid, and it just sunk them. So, I don't know. I would really like to see them make a serious run at Aaron Judge. Another guy who's out there I just think is less realistic is Trey Turner. We've heard that he wants to play on the East Coast. Sometimes these rumors are true, sometimes they're not. But I did read that somewhere earlier this year that he eventually wants to be closer to Florida, I think is what it said. I'm assuming he lives in Florida. But obviously San Francisco is not Florida. It's very far from Florida. And so I just think Trey Turner's probably not likely, but he's not as big of a name or face as Aaron Judge, but he's just as good. Maybe not just as good, but very different skill set. But I think would fit the Giants nicely. The thing about Judge is he's actually a good defender, even though he's a monster in terms of his size. But Turner, fast, athletic, can play short, can play center, can play second. So very good player. Nolan Arenado would also be one of these guys who would go into the elite category. And the thing is, he's said that he doesn't want to leave the Cardinals. So I just imagine he's going to end up back there. Carlos Correa, probably going to opt out of his deal with the Twins. I'm just not sure there's necessarily the best fit because Crawford exists and is probably going to play shortstop because they're committed for $16 million next year. And so if you sign Correa, who has this opt-out, it's just not the most obvious fit, but he certainly would. He wouldn't go into that elite category, but he would go into the above average category. Hasn't had the best season, so I'm not sure what his contract is going to be. I really wish they had signed like Corey Seager in the offseason. They had the financial flexibility to do something like that, and we just didn't hear any kind of rumors that they were even involved, and that was disappointing. Xander Bogaerts can opt out, but he's a true shortstop. So, well, he's not the best defensive shortstop, I don't believe, but he's another guy who would go into that above average category. And then how about Jacob deGrom? Give him a 2-year deal, and he certainly goes into that elite category. So coming up in just a minute, we're going to explore some of the guys who aren't the upper tier guys. I feel like we just covered the upper tier elite players. But what about at least getting some above average / solid players to add to that core for the Giants? Guys who can kind of pair in that Logan Webb category. All of that in just a second. But first, all right, as promised, more players for the Giants to add to this core that ranks 28th on this list, and I think it's correct. I think it's 100% correct. That has been what's so depressing about this, and we've talked about this throughout the year, that they just haven't produced anybody who gets you excited about the present or the future. And you do have some solid. I think the guys like we have focused on the season of Alex Cobb and the fact that he can be brought back in 2023 and 2024 with a club option. The emergence of Joey Bart being improved, but still not, he's not Buster Posey at this point. He's just solid as he fits into this category. Slater and Yastrzemski, competent platoon potentially. Thairo Estrada has had a solid year. Again, that word, solid, but not, he's not a impact player. He's just a solid player. Camilo Doval, he could, I mean, relievers have a hard time going into that above average category if the threshold really is 3 to 5 WAR. Relievers just don't pitch enough to get into that category. There might be one reliever that's put into that category, maybe Edwin Diaz, who is a free agent. And then prospects, Luciano, Harrison, Matos, and Bailey. I thought that was interesting to see Bailey there, and Matos has had a down year. But Harrison and Luciano, these are guys who are in play for next year. Harrison maybe sooner, and Luciano maybe as a September call-up next year. But they need these guys to finally start funneling into the major leagues. And the fact that, you know, Hunter Bishop and all these picks from 2019 on just haven't really done all that well, and certainly haven't started to make an impact at the major league level, is a problem. So, as McDaniel said, they need to supplement the core through free agency, which is something they have not done at all since Farhan Zaidi took over, except on the pitching side. They have, for starters, with Gausman and with Rodon, they've gotten ace-level production from free agency on the pitching side. So why not do it on the position player side? I don't think they're opposed to it. I think it's more they have a hard time convincing position players to play in San Francisco, a tough place to hit. But that's why I say, Judge, circles in red ink, Judge, he would probably want to play here if you make him a competitive or match any offer from the Yankees, for example. So anyway, some other guys, Dansby Swanson, again, a true shortstop. There's a lot of good shortstops, as there were last year. And so it's disappointing that they gave Crawford that extension if it's keeping them from signing one of these guys who could be a much better player. But they've got Crawford, and I think you're getting competence out of Crawford at least. He's not like a total disaster. But still, all these players I just named as shortstops are better. Rodon is listed here. I'm looking at MLB Trade Rumors power-ranked free agents. Rodon is number 8. And yeah, I already said I think they should bring him back. Edwin Diaz as a reliever makes an appearance here. I think that I'd like to see them go after a guy like Edwin Diaz. I'm just not sure they're going to spend big on a reliever. But the honorable mentions is where we find some intriguing names here. And I have been talking about Brandon Nimmo for a while here. If you listen to the show regularly, I've probably mentioned him 5 times, 5 different episodes in the last couple months. When we're looking at 2022, 23 free agents, Nimmo made a great catch in the game against the Dodgers last night. Very good game, putting up 3.9 Fangraphs wins above replacement so far this year in 122 games. He is an above average hitter. He is a guy who doesn't chase out of the strike zone. He's got very good chase rates. His career outside the zone swing rate is 21.5. I think league average is around 33. So that is excellent. If I would imagine that if I sorted by since 2016, what's the lowest chase rate among qualified hitters, he might be number 1, but just based on looking at that number. He also makes a lot of contact. He's not going to wow you with power. He's got roughly average power, I would say, but the ability to get on base via the walk and also collect hits. I mean, he's got a 335 career average on balls in play, which is above average, which doesn't necessarily mean luck. I think a lot of people think that means luck, but some guys just have the skill set to better have a sustainable above average on balls in play. And so anyway, the career slash line for Brandon Nimmo is a 266 average, a 384 on base, and a 438 slugging. Overall, it's a 132 weighted runs created plus with good defense as well. And so I think he would fit into that category. You could probably get Nimmo on a 4-year deal. He's 29 years old. He'll turn 30 in March, but he just makes a ton of sense for the San Francisco Giants. I don't know if there's mutual interest. Money talks, right? So if you make the best offer, there's arguably going to be interest. So I really like Nimmo. If you could, like I said, sign Nimmo and Judge and Rodon, you've got Judge would go into the elite category. Rodon probably would as well. And Nimmo would go into the Logan Webb, I think, above average category. So suddenly you'd have 2 elite and 2 solid instead of right now 0 elite, 1 solid. Again, you're not constructing your roster to satisfy Kiley McDaniel. But at the same time, I think Kiley McDaniel makes a great point, and that this is really the crux of the problem for the Giants. So anyway, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Now for your second listen, go check out the Ultimate Pro Football Preview 2022, an 8-episode extravaganza to get you ready for the NFL season. The local team experts of the Locked On Podcast Network plus a betting angle from Lee Sterling of Locked On Bets all combined into one ultimate NFL preview. Search for Ultimate Pro Football Preview 2022 on your Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. It helps me out a lot, so thank you in advance, and thank you to everyone who's done so already. Coming up tomorrow, we're going to dip into the mailbag, so look out on Twitter for a prompt. We're also going to talk about Lewis Brinson, the Giants making a minor league trade for an intriguing guy who was the centerpiece of the Christian Yelich deal, along with Isan Diaz, who they also acquired this year. But Brinson may be a September call-up guy, so we'll get into that and mailbag questions tomorrow. Anyway, thanks again for listening. You are now Locked On Giants.